Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. This week, I'm standing up because I want to, yeah? Welcome back to the channel where somebody who knows absolutely nothing about anything, talk about something. And in this week's iteration of a sad wanker waffles about shite, I'm going to be talking about Marky Mark.
Weghorst? I've never heard. That's not even a real name. Woot Weghorst. You belong on a Harry Potter film. Bullshit. I've never heard of you in my bloody life.
Mark Goldbridge. So, I would assume, because you're clicking on this video, you have seen Mark Goldbridge recently conducted an interview with Lawrence McKenna, formerly of The Kickoff. It was a very insightful interview. There has been a lot of questions over what really happened behind the scenes with The Kickoff. And very briefly, True Geordie said something which was Islamophobic, which therefore caused Adam, Boovie, Rory and Lawrence all to basically leave The Kickoff. True Geordie got an entire new cast and he's been doing that ever since, and this is what we now have as The Kickoff. Back in the day, those were the guys that were on it. Lawrence has gone off and done his own thing and hasn't really been present. Rory, Boovie, Adam, they all went over to make their own podcast called The Club, which is again doing very well, and that's kind of how it was left and has been for about 2 years. So if you were, like me, a mix of Mark from Peep Show and Frank Gallagher from Shameless, then you probably enjoyed The Kickoff to some degree, because what I lacked in social skills and control over my drinking, I sure made up for with days in bed watching shit about football. And The Kickoff was the be-all and end-all of football YouTube back then. It would pull in, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and also they would have genuinely good debates on there as well. They would talk about the political side of football. Not only did they get a lot of viewership, also they made, in my opinion, very good content. When the fallout then happened, it was a bit shit, and The Kickoff as a show hasn't recovered since. I think The Club, whilst it is a good podcast, it doesn't come close to what The Kickoff used to be. And Lawrence, as he says in this interview, he's been left kind of with quite a lot of struggle to get through since leaving The Kickoff. But anyway, what I want to talk about today is something that Mark Goldbridge and Lawrence discuss in this podcast, which is about the YouTube football space and the wider space on TikTok and other social media sites, and how it's changed from when The Kickoff was in its prime. Basically, Mark Goldbridge kind of starts off this little discussion by saying that the YouTube space has let the mainstream back in. So what I think he means by that is the fact that way back when The Kickoff was doing its thing and football YouTube wasn't in its infancy, but it was still growing, it was still, people were figuring out what it actually was. That was at a time when Sky, BT, basically all the mainstream broadcasters who were involved in football, they didn't really know what they were doing on YouTube. Lawrence says Sky looked at what Kickoff were doing and thought, how can we do that? They were competitors, and it would be arguable to say that The Kickoff was out competing Sky. It was, because again, they were getting massive views. They didn't really have an awful lot of mainstream pundits come onto The Kickoff, and it was very much just 4 or 5 mates talking about football, but garnering massive amounts of views. And I think that was what made the football space so special, was the fact the mainstream were looking at YouTube and thinking, how can we do that? All the mainstream broadcasters now have YouTube channels where they do very similar things to The Kickoff. However, back then, The Kickoff basically controlled the power in that space. They could reject offers from Sky and BT and say, we don't need you, we don't want you, because we're doing our own thing over here. We don't have to adhere to the rules that you would if you were on television. Television is so different to YouTube, because on YouTube you can say what you want, you can upload what you want. On Sky and BT there are so many different sets of people that content has to get through before it makes it onto the screen. It has to be vetted, it has to be edited, it has to be scripted, re-scripted, scripted again. The Kickoff was so good because it was just people saying exactly what they wanted about football. And that kind of also made the arguments on The Kickoff so much more organic and enjoyable, is because you see Rory Jennings going red in the face and losing his temper towards Brian, who's also losing his temper, as they argue about Aubameyang or whatever. And it just felt very natural. It felt like you were sat at the pub with your mates. Whereas back then, especially on television, it didn't feel like that. You knew it was a studio. You knew everyone was wearing makeup. You knew that everything was scripted. You knew it was kind of, very PG. They wouldn't swear. They wouldn't say things that were too controversial. And that was the beauty of what YouTube was and what what YouTube still is to an extent, specifically what the kickoff was. It kind of embodied all the advantages of YouTube, whereas the mainstream didn't have those advantages, which is why back then as well, the viewership was so high. You know, the trajectory was just up for the kickoff and for mainstream, for the football space on YouTube. Okay, anyway, so I'm going to have to read this from my little notebook. If you've got a fucking problem with it, click off the video. But Goldbridge, about an hour into the interview with Lawrence, says, I am paraphrasing, visually it looks good, top 10 best players in the world. It's not where we should be. It's oversaturated. Everybody does most underrated 11. Top 10 best players. Biggest flop of the season. You can't ignore it because it gets views, but it's not where we should be. We were heading somewhere very different. So what the fuck does that mean, Mark? Marky Mark, what the fuck does that mean? Let's try and figure it out. Again, I think what Mark Goldbridge there is saying is, and it happens anywhere, when the kickoff was massive, it wasn't a massively saturated market. So you had like 2, 3, 4 football creators who were creating amazing content, and they got, you know, a lot of the views because the market wasn't massively oversaturated. Fast forward to today, the market is massively oversaturated. I can't go on fucking TikTok without seeing a podcast with two blokes who I've never seen or heard of before talking about how the Arsenal Invincible team is actually more impressive than the treble winning team. Fuck off. What Mark there I think is trying to say is that now, because the market's become so oversaturated, there are formulas and algorithms and patterns you can spot with what gets the most views. So a good example of this is Pitchside. I would say they are industry leaders in terms of the views they get, and probably in terms of the reoccurring audience they get, because I'm a fan of Pitchside. I quite enjoy their content as much as I can pick holes in it, and I probably will do today. I still really enjoy their content, and I watch it every week they put it out, and they're doing their thing, and I'm not criticising them for being creative. I think it's great. But the one thing you will notice is that they have a very strict formula that they stick to, which is most weeks when you look at the videos they upload onto their channel, it's top 10 this, top 10 that. Mark said in there, biggest flop of the season, best signing of the season, biggest managerial flop of the season, underrated 11, fall off 11. And it's because now, like I said, because the market's so oversaturated, you can just see the patterns of what gets views. So now all the content creators in this space aren't making football content because they enjoy it, they're passionate about it, they want to make something that entertains fans as much as they make it because they want to get views. They think that's the aim of the game when making content. This might be applicable really on a wider scale to YouTube itself, where it feels very much that most people upload, and maybe TikTok as well, upload content purely now just to get views, and they treat it as a game. And that's fair enough if that's what you get into it for. But especially lads who are on the kickoff, the lads that are on the kickoff. I know that Lewis and Theo obviously get a lot of crap because they have some questionable takes. The balance of their comedic value, I suppose, coupled with Reeve and Tom Garrett's genuine knowledge of football, I feel like I would love to see what they'd be like if they didn't just adhere to views, if they didn't just try and meet a quota of views that they have every month. And I know that it's a business and that's how it works, but again, this is what I think Mark Goldbridge is trying to say, is that the football YouTube and creator space now is just centred around views. It's not centred around football. And I think Mark Goldbridge is saying that if the kickoff maybe had survived and we'd seen how that show had evolved over time, the YouTube space could look very different, because now the kickoff potentially would be getting millions of views an episode. Obviously people would try and copy that, but the thing the kickoff was good at was not just focusing on topics that would get views. They'd talk about whatever was relevant, and they would dissect it and actually discuss it, and it would make for interesting reading. It was good. They'd explore it well. And obviously that didn't happen, and then Sky came in with the Soccer Social, and other platforms, mainstream media platforms, came in and started their own shows, and then TikTok came about, and that introduced the whole idea of clipping somebody. And now very much it feels like we're going to have a show which is about debate, but the actual show itself is more about trying to get 15-second clips that we can upload to TikTok to get millions and millions and millions and millions of views, which therefore gives us millions and millions and millions of pounds in revenue, and also gets more eyes on our show. So then next time we want to clip somebody, it gets even more views. That's kind of where we're at. It's the era of clipping. It's not, like Mark Goldbridge said, where the YouTube football space really should be. And obviously I'm not saying that everyone in the YouTube football space is doing stuff for views. I think that HITC Sevens, and I think his name's Alfie, makes some of the best YouTube videos I've seen. Same with the Retro Route, who does like documentaries, biopics about footballers. Again, amazing football content. But again, that's a tiny portion of this space, and it's so oversaturated now with just people giving opinions they know will get views. videos, instead of having, like the Kickoff did, genuine debate about football. Mark Goldbridge is one of the guys that have been around for a very long time, and he's seen firsthand the evolution of football YouTube. So when you have somebody like him, who is probably one of the most experienced football YouTubers there is, saying that the football YouTube space isn't where it should be, we have to listen to him, and we have to kind of think about it a little bit. But the issue is that it's very difficult for people, including myself, to turn a blind eye to what gets views and what gets clicks, because that's what gets revenue, that's what gives us a career out of this, instead of just making these videos in our bedrooms. I really would love to again hear your guys' opinion, as I say every week, and I'd love to get your take on whether you think the YouTube football space has become oversaturated and it has become a little bit too obsessed with views and clicks and has lost that originality of debate and conversation and dissection and argument and all of those things. So yeah, just let me know what you think in the comments. Maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree. Don't be a 12-year-old about this. I'm not saying that fucking a Pitchside or any other football YouTuber is doing something wrong. Yeah, I'm very green to this space. I've made like, what, 13 videos, so I'll go and fuck myself, really. I probably should, but, you know. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm going to try and upload another video this week or next week. I'm actually in Amsterdam at the end of this week, so I'll be sitting in my bedroom, being too scared to talk to anybody. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.